Welcome back to the Lowdown. I'm Michael Smith, and joining me today, Robert Palmer, our head of financial planning. And Robert, today we're going to talk about something I think is very important. While everything's important to business owners, but I think one thing that's very essential is talking about buy-sell agreements. So I thought maybe we could just kind of kick off the show, discuss and tell us what exactly is a buy-sell agreement.
A buy-sell agreement is an agreement between business owners that basically outlines certain qualifying events that lead to a liquidation event where a percentage of equity is purchased by the other partner or perhaps by the business entity itself. The whole point of the buy-sell agreement is to provide continuity for a business.
Let's get into, there's several types, and I know there's probably many, but maybe kind of boil it down to what are the main types that you normally see business owners use?
Yeah, so cross-purchase agreements or a share buyback, those tend to be the two most common, and that the differentiation between the two is whether the contract is between the business partner and the business entity itself, or the business partner and his other partners.
And then you said the cross-sell?
Well, that's the cross-sell is basically between the different partners. I buy one, you buy one, we're in businthis together, we effectively have an agreement with one another. If there are more partners, then we all have agreements with each other.
One of the things is, maybe kind of tell the audience, what type of businesses, at what point would you actually want to consider or use a buy-sell agreement?
It tends to be really relevant for small businesses, particularly those that have multiple partners. Okay. Because at the end of the day, when you're in a small business or even a mid-sized business, every partner is a critical employee, right? They drive business, they allow it to continue moving forward, and they're really essential to the continuity of it. So when you lose one of those partners, there needs to be a plan in place to help subsidize that void. And that's really where buy-sell agreements come into play. If the firm itself is getting money to pay somebody out, there's now a need to bring in somebody new or to provide a new resource to make sure that the business can keep functioning well. And so if you're getting bought out as a partner, let's say I'm a business owner and I pass away, and now I need to make sure that my family's taken care of, I'm no longer there. What is my family going to do with the business equity? My family doesn't run the business, I do. So what are they going to do with that equity? The buy-sell makes it so the business or my other partners effectively give them a lump sum, so now they're taken care of. When you look at the business, now it's what does the business do? Well, they don't have to worry about someone coming in with equity ownership or voting rights conflicting with the continuity of the business. Instead, those that are still in the business can continue to run it as needed.
Well, one of the biggest things is when, we talk to business owners all the time, and especially when a couple guys or a couple people are starting a business, everybody's gung-ho. You're talking about, your clientele, your future profitability. Everybody's, all rosy-eyed, but no one thinks about some of the things where a buy-sell is appropriate, such as death, right? We don't want to talk about death. Disability, those are things that, again, these are not exciting subjects. And then, of course, maybe divorce and basically burnout. Those are like four things really that you need, to cover in a business.
Yeah, it's really about hedging against the unforeseeable. Some of which is relatively predictable because at some point you're probably going to pass away.
Oh yeah, of course, right?
It's important for your business to plan for that because otherwise you're going to be stuck with something that might be dead in the water. And you really need to make sure that you have a plan for that business to continue moving forward, continue growing, or at least be able to continue to provide for the employees that you've been able to aggregate up to that point. Because remember, it's not just you and your family anymore. It's you, your family, your business partners, and everybody else that the business employs. That's really the crux of the buy-sell agreement. It ensures that all those people are insured and protected.
I had a story one time. I sat with a couple of business owners, and they were trying to figure out why exactly would they want a buy-sell agreement. And I said, well, look, if something were to happen to you today, an example, death, and obviously your shares would go to your spouse, the last thing your partner probably wants is your spouse coming in or your children coming in to run a business they know nothing about.
That's right.
And I'm pretty sure they don't want to do that as well. So these are things you got to think ahead of time. Again, those are things that most people don't want to talk about, death, disability, and divorce, but you got to anticipate that. You got to think, hey, one of those three could happen. Probability is it's very likely that one of those three could very much happen within the course of the business, right?
Well, you have to make sure that it's drafted correctly too. I can't even tell you how many times I've sat down and reviewed a buy-sell agreement that was missing critical provisions. We dealt with one not too long ago where the death provision was missing.
Okay.
So in the event that a partner, yeah, that's a pretty big one. If the partner passes away, nothing gets triggered. That's a critical thing that you want to make sure is in the contract. Now, that's an extreme example.
Sure.
But the point is that you have to make sure these things are drafted correctly and are accounting for those unforeseeable moments that you're trying to protect against.
Well, that brings me into the components, right? So, what is the formula for the valuation and then funding? So maybe you can elaborate on those parts.
Yeah, so to that point, that can be a little bit tricky depending on the business model you're in. You could have a very dynamic business that's growing very quickly, in which case valuations are needed more often and perhaps additional funding for buy-sell agreements need to be reassessed every so often or periodically. A lot of small business find themselves stabilizing at a certain revenue plateau that makes buy-sell agreements and the valuation of a business relatively easy to measure, so it's not necessarily as needed as often. So you have to kind of look at your business, get a good gauge for how quickly it's growing, whether it's plateaued, to give yourself an understanding of, hey, how often should I be reevaluating this? If you're running at the same multiple or collecting the same amount of money each year, you only probably need to do it a few times, and you can do it periodically throughout every few years. But if you're rapidly growing, expanding into new markets and accumulating new debt, that changes everything because your business is effectively now impacting more and more people, which means that your role in the business is getting bigger, just like your partners are.
Yep.
So now you're more valuable. So you yourself need to value yourself correctly.
So who would you actually advise to help a business owner determine the components, determine the funding, and assist with maybe putting a buy-sell agreement together?
Yeah,
Who's some key people there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The answer is there's probably a few resources you could go to get a good valuation. People in the insurance industry would say go to them.
Yeah.
If you're gonna fund the buy-sell agreement with an insurance policy, which is pretty common because it provides a guaranteed lump sum to individuals in the event of those qualifying events, they're going to be very quick to say this is how much you need. However, you can get an evaluation from a business consultant. Certain attorneys can do it. Even you yourself can typically go out and get a free quote or a free estimation as to the value of your business. It probably won't be as accurate as you would need, but it's really important that when you come to the table and assess whether you need a buy-sell agreement, that you understand what your value is and what your business's value is, so you're not over-insuring, and more importantly, that you're not under-insuring in the event something gets triggered and there's a payout.
I was with a business owner not too long ago. They had a formula and they didn't have any funding source in there. They basically said if something happened, if one of us died, we're going to pay the spouse or the family off within 5 years. And just did a quick look at their numbers. I said, do you realize that if these three partners, so it's three partners, the top partners in the business, if these three partners, something were to happen like that, you basically bankrupt your firm. So what they ended up structuring was looking at insurance through a cross purchase. That was a down payment, and then after that, then the 5-year funding based on that formula, it didn't bankrupt the company or didn't basically cash flow strap the business. So those are things you got to think through. It's not as simple as just putting a quick little insurance policy or basically a statement together. You really got to think through how that's going to work.
Yeah, and to that point, there's a lot about buy-sell agreements that are established that never get properly funded. So I mean, you do not necessarily need insurance to fund the buy-sell agreement. You can do it yourself, either through escrow or through other types of accounts. But the reality is that typically when it comes to those unforeseen events, you want something guaranteed, or at least something that's as ironclad as the contract you're signing, and insurance is a contract. And you can ensure that those funds are going to be there when your company and your family need it the most. So,
well, personally for me, it's a peace of mind knowing that, in my situation, I have a buy-sell here, and I know that if something were to happen to me tomorrow, my family's got something secured. Like you said, there's something certain here that's going to help fund that. So it gives me a lot of peace of mind, which is what we want when we're putting together, something that happens to us beyond the grave of our estate plan. We want that peace of mind. You mentioned earlier about growing businesses, right? One of the other things I think I'd bring up is bank lending. One of the things that banks like, if you're going to be looking for money or for lending of any type, when the banker or whoever it may be, private equity comes in, they definitely like to see buy-sells. They'd like to see that you have that established. That is very helpful, and especially if you're a growing business or anticipate you're going to grow.
Lowers your risk, right? I mean, if you go and get a loan and you got a ton of debt and there's not a whole lot of assets there to back in the event that something happens to you, bank's probably going to be a little less likely to give you the amount of money you need. But if you're a business, you want to kind of assess it the same way. You want to look like something that's credible and something that people want to lend money to. If you have a buy-sell agreement, the bank can be at ease knowing that even if something happens to you, the business is going to keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to ask you this on a scale of 1 to 10. How important is a buy-sell agreement for a business owner?
I would say for business owners in particular, everything definitely feels like a 10, and there's certainly a lot of important things out there. Buy-sell agreements are definitely something you need to consider when you have partners. It's top of the list, and the main reason being is because if you care about your employees, you care about the continuity of your business, and you care about your family, there's no reason not to put this at the top of the list. There's just not.
Well said, and Robert, thanks for joining as always, but all good information, and thanks for coming on today.
It's a pleasure.
All right.